a man finds his brother is killed, and he's bent on revenge. That's basically the story, of course, of Get Carter. We'll be talking about the 1971 version, the 2000. I'm John Chang, Dan Edmonds.
All right.
I've been listening to the biography of Michael Caine, and the question that kind of popped in my mind was, what is it about some actors that we really like? We just can see them in a diverse set of roles. We kind of talked about this in some different ways and some different actors and stuff. But here's somebody who like he's so believable in some pretty dang different kind of unlike some that we typically see typecast stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean he's an incredibly diverse actor. He's done the lovable sort of womanizing guy in Alfie, the cheeky, lovable rogue in Job, and this, the absolutely sort of hard-bitten hard man in Get Carter. Yeah, no, I mean it's just a very talented actor. It's hard to determine why he's so good at so many different roles. He brings a certain sort of subtlety, I think, to his roles, and it's just obviously has the ability to really sort of empathize with someone in that particular position and just portray it really well. I mean, it's just basically acting talent. He's like textbook talented actor, really.
There's that, but also I think what's funny to me, and we've talked about this other times, is that there's something about audiences we buy him in those different roles. And there's something that I noticed in Get Carter that we'll talk more about once we get into the movie. But there's something about him that we can see him in the different kind of ways. Like you said, we can see him as kind of, I guess he is charming in different ways, and other times he does come across as a tough guy and stuff like that. As he's done kind of more, kind of the Icarus File kind of roles and stuff like that. So there's something about him that we don't necessarily typecast him as much, it seems.
Yeah, I think he's also just got like a very natural charisma that sort of comes across. And yeah, but you're absolutely right. I mean, he's done, just a huge sort of variety of roles. And he's believable, or he's believable enough that by the time you get into the rest of the movie a bit, you're completely sold on it, basically.
Yeah, I think partially what it is the fact that even though he has kind of his background is what's called growing up primarily he's done acting and stuff like that, but he was in the military. I think that kind of where he's he went through the training. So in other words, it's not him pretending to be to have kind of ability or endurance to kind of withstand some pretty harsh conditions. He wasn't kind of in Korea during the Korean War. In fact, I guess apparently he's talked about that different times, that he's gone through some pretty harrowing situations. So then he's not pretending, I guess, in that sense.
No, absolutely. He's reliving it. Yeah, I think you find that with a lot of the actors from England who made it over there. I guess because they traveled as part of the military, they also had no problem with traveling to another country to try and just try their luck. So, yeah.
That's a good point. So, yeah, I guess let's dive into the original. In this one, the 71 version, Mike Hodges is the director. And there's some kind of decent names, Ian Hendry, Britt Ekland. So it's pretty much I guess at the time relatively big movie for kind of what it is and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget Alun Armstrong, who as Keith, who was in such classics as Krull and various other sort of action fantasy movies of the 80s. And quite a few other TV and film work, and a really amazing performance, I think, from John Osborne as Kinnear, the sort of the crime boss, as the poker. He's very believable as someone who's like this master poker player, a very camp sort of, poker master. He's pretty good at that. But yeah, I mean, a very sort of odd bit part for Britt Ekland, really. She'd go on to be in, I think, The Spy Who Loved Me in James Bond.
I was going to say, yeah.
But it's weird. It's got for such a sort of small scale movie, it's got some
Mhm.
pretty impressive people, at least from
Yeah.
the sort of English acting world at the time.
Mhm.
And it is definitely not a glamorous movie by any stretch
No.
of the imagination. You know, you're seeing the end of the sort of optimistic period of the 1960s in London and England, and now, you know, the parts of the country that suffered in the 70s
Mhm.
were the north, where you had a lot of the coal mining industry was being sort of slowly sort of wound down, a lot of problems with the unions and things like this. And so you're really sort of seeing a very impoverished northern Newcastle in this.
Yeah, the
So yeah,
grittiness
it's
definitely
grim.
comes across, yeah, especially from like the scenes and stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's you know, what's interesting about this is that it kind of subverts your expectations, because
Hmm.
we all know Michael Caine as either like someone who's been in a sort of a war movie, or
Mhm.
as the kind of the cynical but kind of cool spy in Harry Palmer,
Mhm.
or, you know, the, as we said, the ladies man in Alfie, and then the sort of
Mhm.
lovable rogue as Charlie Croker in Italian Job. And in this is, there are some sort of humorous lines to begin with,
Mhm.
but fairly soon you realize that he's just, you know, a very kind of self-centered
Mhm.
psychopath, basically, who's just sort of uncompromising, and basically just does
Yeah,
whatever the hell he wants,
it's
regardless of
pretty
other
grim,
people.
and
Yeah,
you know, like you said, you know, like some spoilers or minus spoilers is the fact that like he's got no qualms about killing or letting somebody get killed in this one.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there's you know, there's sort of people who've helped him who end up just getting beaten up, and he's just like, well, I didn't, you know, he just tries to sort of brush it over. I mean, my favorite thing in this
Mhm.
movie, actually, I mean, I still find it quite funny, even though it's such a sort of grim movie, because
Mhm.
it seems that every available opportunity, he just hands some cash over to people and says, here, get yourself some karate lessons, or get yourself a nice dress, or, you know, this will pay for the damages and things like this. But
Right,
I just love the fact that that's his answer to everything, is just hand over some cash and
right.
make a sort of slightly glib remark.
I mean, it seemed like on the one hand that when he kind of says something like that to his niece and everything, that you know, like, oh, he kind of cares about her and stuff like that. And then, you know, like kind of there's this ambiguity. I don't know, it's ambiguous to me at least, that whether or not he's the actual father.
I think I don't think it's that ambiguous, actually,
Okay,
because I think he is the father.
okay.
Basically, that is the main reason I think he leaves the town.
But they never spell it out though. I mean,
No,
that's the thing though, right? Okay.
I mean, there is one of the, I don't know, one of the other characters kind of shouting at him, saying something like, you know,
You
he
don't
didn't
even
know
know,
that,
like,
you, yeah, you
yeah,
don't even know that, you know, she didn't even know that you were the, well, he didn't even know that you were the father, and things like
right,
this. So
right.
I
Hmm.
think, and I think it's, you know, that really gets brought home when he actually finds the tape, because that's quite a sort of poignant scene. It's the only real time you see him have any kind of empathy or feeling throughout the whole movie, really. And
Well,
that's when he's realized he's, you know,
well, that's the
he's
thing, right? That like it seems, at least in this version, or that's on the one hand seems like that's why he really cares, because it is his daughter.
yeah,
And then on the one other hand, he's such a, like you said, he's such a psychopath that you wonder if it's less that like that he actually, that it's his daughter being kind of, you know, hurt, you know, like kind of, you know, is the issue, versus the fact that like, oh, it's something that they did to him, you know, like, oh, they, you know, they're screwed with his daughter, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it's hard to reconcile which is the bigger factor as to why he's so bent on revenge.
I mean, I think for me, it's him coming to grips with this thing that he's been so sort of, he's obviously just been completely self-centered,
Mhm.
and he's got to come to grips with the fact that by really just sort of abandoning his daughter and his brother, he's kind of condemned them to a sort of a life of misery, more or less, up there. And so that, you know, I think it's a kind of a cyclical thing. It comes back to sort of, um, he's only got himself to blame to some degree for a lot of what's happened, you know. And I
Mhm.
think he even says that at one stage, you know, this wouldn't have happened if I was here, or something like
Mhm.
this.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, um, and it's just, I mean, the also, I love the fact that he's just so sort of detached. Like he goes to Doreen and
Mhm.
says, so you want to come and live with me and my girlfriend in South America?
Right.
And it's like, maybe not, you know. Why would you just randomly go and live with your uncle in South America?
Right.
But that was the case. But yeah. And he's not got no qualms about sort of you know, being mean to women or hitting them or mistreating them or anything. So he's a pretty misogynist character as well, which is not what we're really used to from Michael Caine either.
It's also, you know, makes you wonder, like, you know, it goes back to that thing of like, you know, that like, you know, why does he seem to care, you know, like kind of, you know, that you know, like what happens to his niece, right? Like kind of, you know, or daughter, you know, like kind of because like you said, he doesn't seem like kind of he has this kind of soft spot for anything and stuff like that. And so I think, you know, like there's the other part of it that like it's there's different times, like the more the fact that like they blemish his family's honor, I guess it's, you know, because I guess that's what's funny. It goes back to this thing about even though like we talked before about this idea of like no honor among thieves and stuff like that, but there's still this pride, right, that kind of goes with like, you know, like that you know, it's like we haven't gotten into so much gangster movies that where that's a factor, but like different times, like it's more about the fact that like, you know, if you tarnish my honor, I've got to do something, you know, like I've got to send a message and stuff, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. And I mean, this is just like, I'm going to send a message, you know, come what may, and just sort of, you know, unleashes hell basically on this town in the process. Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that as well. I mean, in terms of gangster movies and UK gangster movies, I really think Get Carter is the best UK gangster movie. I don't really think, I mean, you know, the Guy Ritchie ones, they're pretty good, but I mean, nothing is really as kind of gritty and realistic as this. And I think part of that is due to Mike Hodges, who's he doesn't really use any incidental music in this movie. It's music that's playing in the background, so to speak. The only bit really is the theme tune.
I was gonna say, which pretty distinctive.
Distinctive, and also absolutely awesome Roy Budd theme tune there, who's done quite a few sort of theme tunes for various things in the 70s and 80s in the UK. But this one was particularly good. But yeah, most of the movie is shot with lots of sort of ambient noise and just sort of music that's playing in the background, but nothing. Yeah, I don't think there's really any incidental music through the whole thing, and a lot of the filming there's lots of sort of very, you know, almost documentary style filming of people, extras, and just people around that gives it this very kind of
the bars.
You know, yeah.
In fact, I from what I understand, like those are like different times, like, and you kind of get that sense that like, you know, these are just people just like, you know, really looking at, you know, what the, you know, F is kind of going on, like kind of, you know, they're just like just shot and like almost with like no awareness that, you know, kind of that it's a movie, whatever, something like that.
Yeah, and I just love the scene when he's, you know, he's caught unawares by the two thugs from London who have come to kind of bring him back, and he's just sort of like walking out of the house naked with a shotgun, still kind of like steely-eyed and telling them to sort of, you know, move on and things like this. It's it's a classic scene, you know, in a very kind of, you know, normal terrace sort of block in Newcastle. It's an old woman, you know, with a milk bottle next. It's just brilliant.
That's the thing, like, you know, along with like kind of the sparse, you know, soundtrack and stuff, is just like lots of, you know, like these scenes of like you know, like it's to call them row houses, like kind of really is even being kind of, you know, generous and stuff like it, but like it just, you really get the sense of this kind of industrial massiveness of these neighborhoods, and like kind of just you know, we're just and they're bleak, like kind of just like, you know, like I mean, there's kind of quote unquote yards, but it's not like, you know, I mean, you know, I always thought that San Diego had like tiny yards with like a, you know, that's nothing compared to like how like you know, these are like, you feel like what it is like kind of these brick sheds or something like that, and then they just happen to have a little patch of, you know, something green and grass and stuff like that, but otherwise, you know, like kind of it's just extensions of the factories, these brick, you know, industrial, you know, complexes and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like in sort of industrialized housing for industrial workers, basically. And if you notice, they have, you know, they've even got sort of outdoor toilets in a lot of these houses. They're that old, you know.
So there's apparently, I guess, what indoor plumbing was, other than like your sink and stuff, was a luxury, I guess. And
Well, I mean, they've obviously, by the 1970s, they've obviously been updated. But,
sure.
originally a lot of those houses would have been, built a lot earlier and maybe wouldn't have, indoor plumbing necessarily. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Like, just out of curiosity, I don't want too much off tangent, but I'm wondering, like, did they just knock down a lot of these then, or like, like, or are they still like kind of, pretty, kind of grim, even today?
Well, I mean, I think actually what's happened is a lot of what you're seeing in that one probably has got knocked down. I mean, that big car park where there's the confrontation with Brumby, that's all been knocked down now because it was just a sort of it was one of these, post-war. There were lots of very large concrete, either apartment blocks or buildings that were sort of put up because it was very cheap to work with concrete, and it was kind of the brutalist sort of style that was very popular post-war. A lot of those have just been kind of knocked down because they're just way too kind of imposing. Ironically, now we're looking back and thinking, what a shame there were these sort of very monolithic kind of concrete things. So there's almost a sort of an appreciation for them that's come back, but most of them been knocked down. And I'm sure a lot of those houses have probably been replaced by now.
Because Michael Caine talks about during the actual war years and stuff, because that's when he was a kid and everything. It was like kind of almost like a camp or like a luxury to be sent out into the countryside, kind of because they were actually had food and kind of were well fed and everything, and looking at that as like kind of where if that was like kind of like the even what it's like after the war, you've got to wonder like kind of what like kind of the pre-war kind of life was like in the cities and stuff.
Yeah, I'm guessing, in those sort of industrial towns up north, it must have been pretty grim, I'm guessing. But then again, there would have been more money from mining and things like this, so it probably wouldn't have been quite so bad. And various other things that would have been going on. I mean, there's various industries, some of which still survive up there. But yeah, I mean, it captures it, but it's like a nice kind of time capsule in a way. As I say, I've been watching Get Back, the Beatles documentary, and that again, having this amazingly restored sort of images of the 60s is also fascinating to watch as well.
Right. Yeah, because you see, like, like as he's kind of doing this, not quite chase at that point, he's kind of like just initially, I guess, tracking things down. You see him kind of going from like these this kind of swanky slash kind of hip house party, I guess, so to speak. And then next thing you know, he's kind of going to these nightclub, and like you can kind of see like a very different time, like kind of where girls are these kind of miniskirts, and then kind of I mean part of it is, of course, it's a movie, so they're kind of creating these atmospheres. Like it's doubtful that people were partying all the time like that, but it shows a little bit of like kind of the things that were happening, I guess, in those times.
Yeah, it's a very sort of, I don't know, it seems like a very a low key kind of nightclub, though. It's like most of the lights are on, and it's very odd. And I mean, it's but I like the fact that you almost every scene captures like either some sort of act of depravity or poverty in some way, and it's very tight in that respect. Or it either sort of captures that, or it captures just how uncompromisingly sort of cruel he is as well. Well, I think this, we were talking earlier about what makes him so good is that I think when he went into this, he grew up around sort of criminals in the Elephant and Castle area in London, and he felt like they were always kind of a bit of a joke in movies, and he really wanted to sort of bring across the realism what they were really like. And I think he does that very effectively. But what's interesting is that he's also very charismatic as the character of Carter as well. He brings across a sort of, that's what I think you would find that kind of character is. He's sort of well dressed, still quite funny and charismatic, but completely, heartless at the same time as well.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, every scene seems to kind of like, it's either there to sort of develop, to sort of subvert your expectations and just show you how uncompromising he is, or to show you what kind of world he lives in. It's one of where there's sort of random people who are just there to either sort of gamble and drink or have sort of random child pornography tapes lying around, or but they're all kind of in on it and not in on it, or someone might threaten your life or not. Every scene you're not really sure what. I think that's what's so good is the tension. You're not really sure if someone's going to sort of screw someone else over in that particular scene, or who's got the upper hand or who hasn't. It's all really it's vague in the dialogue enough that you don't quite know what's going on in every scene, which I think is really clever.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting also some of the people that they considered for the role and stuff before they ultimately, like everybody from Steve McQueen to Clint Eastwood, Gregory Peck, Burt Lancaster, George C. Scott, like Frank Sinatra, even Elvis Presley. Like, I mean, it's kind of, it's almost like the SNL skit where like they were, they've done like kind of joke skits where auditions for like Star Wars, and they put like,
right.
Like say, what's it called, Al Pacino, like kind of, and how he would act, like kind of, auditioning for Star Wars. And it kind of seems like that now, because it's like you kind of can't imagine anybody else like kind of doing this role. But apparently, Michael Caine actually, I guess he went out of his way to ask for this and stuff too.
Yeah, Michael Caine just, I mean, his the thing he does best is he gives this kind of street level authority to most of his kind of stuff, and it's like, a lot of the characters, you hear them at the beginning of the movie talking about, oh, it was a bloody funny thing that he died, and then another one's going, oh yeah, it's a bloody funny thing, and all you need is Michael Caine to repeat it and go, yeah, it was a bloody funny thing. And that is kind of in that, just it sort of sums him up. And I mean, there's some of the lines that stick in my head that he repeats over and over again, like, do you know a man called Albert Swift? And you're a big man, but you're out of shape. For me, it's a full-time job. Now behave yourself. He's just like the definitive Cockney gangster, in my opinion.
Seriously. I think also what's funny is this is, of course, many years, before, Death Wish and stuff like that. And so it's
quite similar, really, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah,
actually.
Like once he goes on the rampage, it's like there's no stopping him, kind of.
Totally. And it all kind of escalates. He gets worse and worse, as well as time goes on. And it's kind of what I also like. I guess what's also interesting is that you would go into this as a Michael Caine movie expecting to have a hero's journey, but really there's none of that. There's no redemption. All you do is you see him laughing at all the number of people he's killed by the end of the movie, which is, I mean, it's a very kind of 70s cynical thing to have in a movie, but
right.
Funnily enough, because it's so kind of voyeuristic, it's still kind of an enjoyable journey to go on with him in a way.
I mean, I guess in the context of the time, it's funny because on the one hand, 1969 was when we landed on the moon, right? So there's this kind of, a little bit of, hope for humanity thing and stuff like that. But meanwhile, we're deep into, Vietnam, like the world is kind of like, like overall in this Cold War, and, so any second, there could be, the dropping of the bomb and stuff like that. And then I guess even, there, as we're kind of, getting, is that like, on the one hand, there's this kind of artistic creativity, as you talked about in the UK, but also I guess there's this kind of, this economic, kind of depression, right? Like kind of that they're in.
I think it's definitely the north of England and various parts of England really felt it in the 70s pretty severely. We went from a period of the 60s where you had, huge cultural kind of impact from England all around the world, and that we won the World Cup. We had, half of the bands like the Beatles and the Stones, Cream, various other ones, all making a huge influence on the world. And then disco came along, and it was like, well, yeah, we don't really do that in England. So, but I think it really was.
Yeah, that's true, huh? Like disco didn't have the same impact on the UK as it did in the States, as far as I know. Like, I guess I'm not so familiar with like kind of what it was like there, but here in the US, I mean, I'm definitely familiar with like kind of that, I mean, I remember as a kid, like kind of, emulating, or that, like, the idea was kind of like, you get a a disco kind of shirt or wardrobe or stuff like that, because even as a kid you kind of identify with the fact that, like, that was like kind of what like the whole Saturday Night Live, or not live, but the Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta thing was like kind of, like that was like the ultimate cool, kind of, if you will.
Yeah, well, I think, for sort of rock music or rock and roll, for whatever reason, English bands were able to kind of take what we basically started in America, but make it more interesting in a way. I mean, basically the 60s, the most, maybe except for the Doors, I think most of the interesting bands were all English, because there was like Led Zeppelin, Stones, Beatles, it was basically all of them. I mean, I suppose you had the Beach Boys, but they just weren't as anywhere near as edgy as like Led Zeppelin or So yeah, I mean, we managed to do it with rock, but disco was just so, I think, ingrained in American culture, that we couldn't really. We did try and adopt it, and we did have sort of UK disco bands, but it just wasn't the same. It didn't quite have the. We probably had imposter syndrome much more so than we did with rock music, I think.
I mean, generally we think of edgy as kind of having like a little bit of a bite, kind of that kind of connotation stuff. But I feel like the other aspect of edgy, especially in this context,
disco doesn't
That's
really
what I was gonna say.
to me. Yeah,
exactly. It doesn't really push. It also doesn't push any boundaries. Kind of like the way that like the Stones, or some of these different bands that like they were kind of almost like stretching, kind of what rock meant and stuff too.
Well, I mean, believe it or not, listening to it now, but I mean, disco was more of a technological kind of, direction for music than rock was, because a lot of the production got much more sophisticated in the 70s, and you had a lot more synthesizer, electronic sounds, and various other effects
that
you didn't have in 60s music, or was just kind of being experimented on. It kind of all just, gelled into something, and coming up with the most kind of slick, streamlined production and sound was the main sort of goal, I think, rather than something raw and edgy, so to speak. I mean, you did still have rock in the 70s. I mean, I would say, I mean, Black Sabbath was probably like the biggest UK rock band, and they obviously made an impact, but I don't know if there were that many others I can think of off the top of my head. There probably were, but it was all progressive, really. It's not quite the kind of, it diverged away from popular kind of catchy tunes to something more experimental, whereas disco took the helm of all of that kind of, catchy tunes, essentially. It may have more to do with drugs as well. Maybe there's just more cocaine around in the 70s, and people wanted to dance rather than, sit around going on Jai Diva and all this kind of stuff like in the 60s.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to talk about a little bit more at some point. Just kind of like how much like drugs had to do with like kind of the vibe, right? And stuff, like nowadays, like marijuana seems to be the kind of the drug of choice, and it's so readily available. So maybe that's partially why like people would rather just kind of watch something kind of like, that the whole Netflix and chill kind of vibe, I guess, and stuff.
Yeah. And that probably is like a good portion of, I mean, definitely cannabis stocks were like all-time highs during the lockdown, and then sort of crashed the more we were reopening. So yeah, definitely the binge watching at home has to be influenced by that.
And like you and I offline kind of was looking at the trends kind of thing of like movies by genre and stuff like that, and it really is striking how like horror has continued to kind of really just like stocks, kind of like we're just
totally
no stopping it.
We're on a bull run with horror, and
seriously.
And it's just amazing to see things like westerns just completely died out, and even sort of things like comedies are on the decline. It's a really interesting chart, actually.
Right. Which makes you wonder, like, what is going on? Kind of like we would rather be at home and kind of like scared, I guess, and kind of, or for that matter, is it like that there isn't enough or I don't know, like kind of like the like we're in theory the safest that we have been in history, something like that, but the other, we seem to just be really looking to go out of our way to scare ourselves and stuff like that. You know, because this crime is down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's exactly what, like you said, it's just whatever isn't available in real life is what we seek in. You know, most of people don't really travel for adventure anymore, so to speak. They travel for a very kind of sanitized experience, which is probably why fantasy and sci-fi and horror, and I guess thrillers to some degree, are the four main genres that are increasing, because we don't have a lot of danger. We don't really, and we certainly haven't traveled for 2 years now, most of us anyway. And yeah, most, as you say, we're probably at like historically low. But I mean, crime is one of those things that whatever you read on the news is not really reflective of the overall statistics. So yeah. But it makes you wonder though, why would comedy be on the decline as well? We're obviously just not interested in laughing anymore, or maybe we get it from other sources. You know, I guess memes is where we get our yucks from now.
And that's the thing, like even a movie like Get Carter, on the one hand, it's like kind of, you know, it's crime and you know, maybe considered more drama and stuff like that, but there's, you know, quite a bit of action to it too. So it's almost like a little bit of a cross genre. So I think that's the thing that like it's really you know, kind of harder to track to, is like kind of these films that, you know, like, because like you said, you know, like these superhero movies, they're kind of very much a combination of sci-fi, fantasy. You know, there's like kind of a lot of crossover, and even like kind of, you know, like you know, like kind of different times they talk about, you know, universes and stuff like that. And in other words, it's an alternate universe that you're kind of creating, because typically like the more classic science fiction is set in our world, but you know, kind of some alternative time, or you know, kind of some other, you know, possible future and stuff.
Yeah, well, this is definitely a past that I wouldn't be too ready to go back to. I mean, one other thing I did want to say about what I think is just so sort of characteristically English about this movie is, and also kind of feeds into the character of Carter, is that of course there's not very many guns in it, and
that's true.
You know, most of the violence in it is kind of him beating people up, and it's almost like a testament to how little of a threat he perceives other people to be, because he'll just go and hit someone a few times and then let them run back to their boss, because he not only doesn't perceive them as a threat, he doesn't even perceive their boss as a threat either. And he's like, you know, unless it's the southern guys who come and try and actually chase him down with guns, he knows most of the northern thugs won't have anything, so he just beats them up and then just tells them to sod off, you know. So it's a very, you know, not something you'd see very much of unless it was a Western really in the US, because and then it'd still be lots of guns, I assume, everywhere. So it's a very much an English trait there for a gangster movie that you wouldn't normally see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, I guess. You're hitting on something too, of like kind of where it's something that like we're used to from Westerns, you know, like kind of it's like kind of the general expectations, you know, like when we watch a Western, is that like people are just brimming with guns, and so that's kind of like it's really very much part of the whole you know, US identity, right, of like kind of, you know, never mind like kind of, you know, the right to carry arms kind of thing and stuff like that, but it's kind of carried forward into, I guess, almost like kind of where the whole Trump, you know, kind of years was like this kind of reaction to the fact that like, you know, this kind of age of, you know, kind of Westerns is kind of considered archaic, but let's bring it back with, you know, kind of like, you know, the whole slogan of Make America Great, kind of part of it is like kind of, you know, let's bring back the, you know, like kind of the popularity, I guess, if you will, of guns and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think as well, what's interesting is when there's a fist fight in an American movie, unless it's like a thriller with spies and they're like trying to sort of do elaborate martial arts in a toilet or something like that. But like in Westerns, obviously there are much sort of open areas and things. It's almost like when fisticuffs happens, it tends to be when someone really is like super angry at someone and they're just trying to like vent their anger, or you know, or it's like torture or something like that, where they've taken someone prisoner and they're beating them up. It's very rarely like the main, where it isn't like the main use of violence. You know, it's kind of guns are used as, you know, the cool cowboy just doing business, man. It's just like I'm getting paid for hitting this guy. But when people actually hit each other, it feels much more like a sort of human getting really angry with another human. Right. Whereas in this, it's just like, well, this is just like how he does his job day in, day out, which is it's kind of an interesting difference that I noticed. But
yeah, I mean, I've now that you mentioned that, like, it makes me think of how, like, like even like some different James Bond movies where there may be some elaborate kind of way that Mr. Bond, now you die, kind of, like some elaborate kind of arrangement, like kind of almost like a Rubric device to kind of kill them. But then ultimately, after the guns and kind of, like as things narrow down, it's like him, getting down to fisticuffs with like kind of, individual kind of, minions trying to get him, and then, maybe possibly, down to even him versus the, villain and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, they always sort of have at least one scene where there's like a lot of sort of hand-to-hand combat in James Bond. But yeah, it's when in Roger Moore's era, it became much more gun focused because he probably wasn't very good at being convincing in a hand-to-hand.
Well, okay, so that's the one thing that like and apparently like somebody else, like some like kind of movie critic or whatever, criticized Michael Caine running and stuff like that. That like there's something about like I have to admit that like I didn't notice until I read that comment that like about him kind of like running like what's called somebody pretty effeminate or something like that. And
he's quite a dainty runner, isn't he? Yeah.
Because I guess apparently like kind of that's the thing that like with him like kind of that like as kind of like on-screen presence as he comes across as kind of really manly and and he's, again, military background and stuff, but I guess he's not much of an athlete. I mean, that's kind of just I think
he kind of splays his hands out a little bit when he's running, which gives strangely kind of dainty look. So
because he's a pretty slim, tall figure too, I guess. Stuff. And in fact, another kind of connection is that like when Will Smith was going to have his first on-screen like kind of running scene and stuff, like he specifically had this kind of I guess UCLA Olympic athlete whatever train him on kind of how to like look like he's really running and everything. But I guess apparently Michael Caine didn't have that kind of assistance and everything.
I don't think Michael Caine would bother to do that, to be honest with you. That doesn't I mean, really, it's just like, do I need to do this? I'm just running,
Right.
He would be much more focused on the dialogue and trying to portray the emotions of the actor, things, and less on how you look and stuff, I guess. So definitely. Speaking of unconvincing violence, should we move on to the 2000 remake?
I think it's time.
Yeah.
So here we have Sylvester Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone, and I'll say this is the first remake. There was a few last year that made me actually physically angry, and this is one of those from this year. It's the first one that's really actually made me angry, and it took me 3 attempts to watch it. I had to like just turn it off because it was so bad a few times. I mean, let me put it this way though: Get Carter is kind of like an English institution in a way. It's kind of those niche kind of English institutions. So I mean, War of Independence, meh. But you try and like do a bad remake of a classic Michael Caine movie, and that's really going to get to us in England. So,
I mean, this is a weird time for some of these different actors too, because 2000, like kind of at this point, like we're kind of coming off of like Sylvester Stallone had his kind of heyday in the 80s and stuff, like between Rocky series and then also like kind of the whole Rambo kind of thing and stuff. And now like his career had stalled and everything. So like that's like a funny time for his career. Similarly with Mickey Rourke, he went into this whole thing with boxing and stuff like that. And so he got kind of messed up, and like, we kind of see some of that, kind of where his injuries kind of really did, warp his looks, because he was quite, charmer and all that, like in his heyday and everything like that.
Yeah, he was a handsome guy in the 80s, that's for sure. Yeah. And he does look just like plastic surgery messed up in this, And
then Rachel Leigh Cooke, who we may end up talking about, and She's All That, because like that's like kind of the teen version of the My Fair Lady thing and stuff like that. And she had that success, and so it's her career is just starting to take off. So I feel like in some ways her somehow ending up on this project really stole things for her career too and stuff, because she seemed like she was going somewhere, but then like I don't know, it kind of just fizzled after this.
Yeah. I mean, how flawed was this project? Let me count the ways. I mean, Stallone, I like watching Stallone in movies, and I think he's a great sort of action hero. But that's the thing, he's a hero. He's not like an unrelentingly cruel, heartless, person who we're watching on a sort of a journey of destruction. That's just not, he's just doesn't come across, especially when he's in some kind of shiny Vegas suit with immaculately manicured sort of facial hair. It seems so sort of fake compared to the grittiness of the original. The setting is just totally wrong, because you're not going from what was, you're not seeing like this guy from an affluent sort of glamorous lifestyle in LA going to some sort of really dingy kind of backwater, which would make it much more effective. In this, he goes to kind of, it looks like quite a nice kind of town, really.
I was gonna say, like
nice
Seattle is not exactly like kind of the dumpster dive, I mean, Seattle in the early 2000s or late 90s was really starting to see the whole tech effect. Never mind Microsoft, but Amazon was starting to kind of really, kind of kick in and stuff.
I think what they thought, oh, what's kind of like dingy? Oh, grunge music. Oh, Seattle's from grunge music. We'll set it in Seattle. And but I mean, it's just still far too nice. What you should have had him going to, like, West Virginia or something like that, somewhere that would have been the closest analogy, somewhere where the local kind of industry is winding down and there's a lot of poverty,
like Detroit, was another place that was really starting to get hit.
Yeah. That's a bit too, perhaps a little bit too urban, but I mean, either would work. I would have thought. I mean, there's, Michael Caine can deliver a one-liner, even a bad
that's the thing too.
Effectively. And this, I mean, certainly the dialogue was atrocious in this, but you really don't want to know me. And the guy makes fun of it, says, "What is that, your catchphrase?" And you're like, God, I hope it isn't, because that's terrible. And they're going to take this to another level. I mean, oh God, I like shooting him at that point.
I mean, visually though, I have to say, despite the problems with kind of what they chose, it visually was shot well. Like, kind of, I mean, that much I'll give it. That it wasn't like, it's almost like in some ways, I think, like, for me, like, that was one of the things that stuck out about The Crazies, was that, like, even though it was a horror movie and stuff like that, you felt like it was not a horror movie, like, kind of that, like, in terms of how, like, cinematically it was shot and everything.
I think you've been far too generous, John, because I think this was shot awfully.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think there was just so many scenes where, he finds out about his daughter and is just sort of Stallone looking slightly worried, and they just shake the camera all around to make you think, oh, this is an intense emotion we're supposed to be feeling, so we'll shake the camera around a lot.
Right.
And there's all these bits where they sped it up and slowed it down and sped it up. And when I looked at actually the director, he did a load of music videos, and that kind of made sense to me that, like, this just feels like a kind of a music video style movie.
Right.
And then they added weird kind of incidental music that was, a lot of kind of late 90s breakbeat style stuff. Well, actually, it was kind of mid 90s breakbeat that was out of place by the year 2000. But they added a whole bunch of that in, and it,
but they also, like, almost did a homage, I guess, to the Get Carter theme, and stuff like that. So that was kind of weird.
They did a bad homage to it,
That's the thing, like,
I mean, it's kind of like we're putting this in to make it vaguely resemble the original to some degree. What made me laugh, though, was that, when Stallone first meets Michael Caine, who does a cameo in this, we should mention, as Brumby.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We rarely have had that, though, huh?
And I mean, what's weird about this is that he's still got the outfit from Educating Rita, because he looks like a kind of a college professor.
He does.
Who's now a sort of a crime lord. But what's funny is that even dressed as a college professor, when he actually gets nasty with Stallone, he's still much more intimidating than Stallone is, as a bad guy. He just blows him out of the water with sort of his Cockney intimidation bit. It's it's just funny as hell, that scene. I mean, and then just ram this whole thing of, whereas it's very subtle in the original. You don't even know whether he is the father of the daughter or whether he feels any guilt for what's happening. In this one, it's just, you've just got a constant stream of characters going up to him going, oh, why did you leave? And what, you don't even care. Why are you coming back? And oh, if you were here, this wouldn't have happened to him. And why are you coming back? It's so relentless. And it's just like, okay, we get it. Just try and have some charm or wit to this dialogue somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that, like, I think different times Sylvester Stallone has tried that, of trying to have more shades and subtlety of his acting and all that. He's, absolutely great in action movies. He kind of has some of the drama, like, from Rocky, kind of where you really can connect with, kind of heartfelt emotional stuff. But in terms of shades and subtlety of kind of like emotion / dialogue, I think that's kind of like really just kind of drawing the real boundaries of what he can or can't do and stuff like that as an actor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes a really skilled actor to be able to basically have an entire movie revolve around you as a villain with no redemption and still be charismatic enough for people to watch. Michael Caine pulls it off in Get Carter. I would say Christian Bale pulls it off in American Psycho. That's another great example of someone, basically you'd be watching a psychopath for 2 hours, but we're still enjoying it. It's pretty rare, I would say.
Yeah.
Stallone is not the man for the job, unfortunately. And the other thing is, of course, they try to have some kind of redemption in this. He's kind of like, everything works out fine, and we're all dandy and going off into the sunset, which is kind of, it defeats the entire purpose of this. The whole thing is that when you go down this dark journey of revenge, there is no redemption. Crime doesn't pay. Is the kind of overall message. In this, it's kind of like, crime's okay.
That's the part that, like, I think is such a statement of the basic problem with remakes, is that, like, here we have a Hollywood ending to this kind of package deal and stuff like that, versus, like you said, conveying like kind of something really more meaningful and stuff.
What also made me laugh a lot was the fact that, we've already had Stallone be out intimidated by Michael Caine. Then he sort of confronts Mickey Rourke, who's we'll get into that later, but anyway, I mean, he's seen immediately when he came out, I was like, what, I would probably be more scared of Mickey Rourke than I would be in Stallone if I was facing off against these guys. And then he proceeds just to beat the crap out of the guy who's supposed to be the hard man. It's like, well,
we really see
the wrong person here.
We really see what Mickey Rourke's been doing with his boxing. Like he is like, like he's a no shitter, like kind of in this situation, like he's more than believable, like kind of like it's like, oh, okay, he's not just some kind of dude that looks like he knows what he's doing with boxing and stuff, and, and he's kind of I mean, this is somebody who looks like he's been training.
Stallone looks like he's been bodybuilding, and Mickey Rourke looks like he's been kicking the shit out of people. It's pretty obvious. But I mean, so then we'll get to this whole kind of, so in the 1970s in a backwater town in England, well, Newcastle's not backwater, but very conservative times, pornography, especially something with an underage girl, would be shocking, right? By the year 2000, internet porn,
not so much.
Some of this borderline, it's kind of, well, okay, she's underage, but I mean, it's kind of like, this is an entire established industry by the year 2000. It doesn't seem to have anywhere near like the weight that it would do. It would have to be something much grimmer, to have the same kind of shock factor transposed to the year 2000,
like almost like close to like a snuff movie or something like that.
Yeah. Also, the other ridiculous thing in this movie, which is just one of those things where they've got Kinnear as Alan Cumming, as a tech kind of billionaire, who just, his whole dialogue is just him saying how much he's worth, but he's not intimidating, he's not threatening at all. It's just like, so you've got like on one side you've got someone who clearly is just more intimidating and beating him up, and someone who's not at all, and it doesn't even really make sense what's going on into his involvement. It just all seems very muddled. He's just there to kind of waste time, really, and for Stallone to sort of push him around a bit.
Yeah, that was really an odd choice. Like, you know, like somebody who you kind of just like when I see, you know, kind of Alan Cumming going to role, I just kind of expect him to be kind of like this almost, you know, effeminate kind of, you know, kind of dweeb and stuff like that. Like that's his expectation. Like that, no, that's his like kind of typecast, if you will, and stuff like that. And it's not like nearly as menacing as like, you know, like you said, the original Kinnear or something like that.
No, nowhere near as cool either. Yeah, I mean that is so pointless, that whole thing of him with his golf cart and everything else. And yeah, I mean then they try and sort of rework the original lines in, you know, but it's kind of like cat piss in the snow rather than you got eyes like piss holes in the snow, which is, you know, you just can't, don't try and redo it. You're not a Cockney, you know, it's not going to work. Yeah, and so the other thing that, the technological thing that annoyed me was the fact that they're all trying to chase after a CD, right? This one CD that's got the incriminating evidence on it.
Oh man!
And yet, by the year 2000, CD burners are like commonplace. You have them in every PC.
That's what I was thinking too.
Because I remember I worked in a computer shop in like kind of 2001, 2002, and pretty much every computer we sold had a CD burner in it. So someone who's making tons of money running his internet porn business, which I thought was really hilarious anyway, when they're logging on with the old sort of internet. I think, what was it?
Right.
It wasn't Yahoo. It was like another web browser that's gone away of history.
Lycos or something like that.
Lycos, that's right. Yeah, sponsored by Lycos. I thought that was brilliant. Yeah. I mean, didn't make any sense.
Right.
So,
this was definitely like was a weird kind of movie, and you know, like just, you know, the many reasons that you said, and then also like kind of, I mean, it just, I think it was also a weird time for, you know, these different actors and their careers. It's just kind of overall a really strange project.
And what also didn't make any sense is the original Get Carter has lots of physical violence in it, basically, and you've got a character known for physical violence, Sylvester Stallone, yet there's hardly any physical violence in the movie. You know, there's a car chase and he beats, I think, like one person up, but that's it. You know, it didn't make any sense from that perspective of like why they did that. Yeah, and there's a lot of, what you find is a lot of the characters talk about how tough he is. And he talks tough to them, but there's actually no violence in the movie. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, you know, you had even like an actor like Tom Sizemore. He was, you know, there for uncredited roles, stuff like that. And he's kind of somebody who I typically think of like kind of as, you know, he's like a muscle character. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, you see him in the movie, you generally expect him to kind of, you know, get physical and stuff like that. But no, you know,
he made a cappuccino, didn't he, in this?
I think so.
Yeah. So yeah, and I mean, then you kind of got, and rather than this kind of matter-of-fact documentary style voyeurism of the original, sort of like making you feel like, you know, you're watching the real seedy underbelly of this crime world. In this one, you've got this weird kind of sped up, slowed down. It looks like he's watching this porn movie at like 2 times speed or something.
Right.
And that whole scene was just really stupid. I mean, it just kind of completely defeated the purpose of him discovering something, you know, that upset him. And then, of course, you had like this long, heartfelt scene with Doreen, which is totally against the character because they're desperately trying to make him likable.
Yeah.
It's just, so annoying. There's lots of scenes with just Stallone looking wide-eyed at the camera a lot. He's just like this for a lot of the movie, and they're like, come on, we need more than this. Yeah,
One thing I thought, kind of worth mentioning was an interesting thing was, we'd actually seen like the character who plays Geraldine's kind of like the connection, if you will, to the things going on with Doreen and stuff like that. Is Rhona Mitra, who actually was in the Hollow Man as the neighbor that was attacked and stuff
that's
like
right.
that.
Oh,
Yes.
right. That was Rhona
Yep.
Mitra, was it? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, she's horribly miscast in this as like some sort of, I don't know. Yeah, kind of. She's supposed to be, I mean, if she's supposed to be Geraldine from the original, who was kind of like a drug addict or like an
Mhm.
alcoholic, in
Mhm.
this, she just seems sort of like to wobble around a bit, but is completely clear headed the entire time. She just doesn't look like that kind of person
And
at all.
and the role itself like seems to be supposed to convey that like she's not never mind drug addict, but just like a pretty much like like pretty vapid or something like that.
Mm,
And I think like that's like like they try to have give her a southern accent to convey that, but she's actually
mm.
like like it's funny like later on she ends up in these roles where like she's playing like these scientists, and so in other words like kind of in the future like she'll end up in roles that like really take much more advantage of what she's capable of and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like in the series The Last Ship, that which I actually know her more from, she's kind of Dr. Rachel Scott, kind of who kind of helps to find the cure for this virus that ravages the world, and she's convincing in that kind of
right, right.
so to put her in this role where she's kind of like supposed to have a southern act, it's kind of like the equivalent of like
Yeah,
maybe putting an actress like what's it called, I'm thinking of the I'm drawing a blank, but Meryl Streep or something like. Actually, that is funny how like in the movie that we were talking about, they do put Meryl Streep as the president, as kind of like like somebody who's supposed to be like a red state follower, but it's
right.
done for comedic effect. So it's one
Yeah,
thing if
yeah.
they were doing this, casting her in this role for comedic effect, but and Get Carter, it's not the case though. With Rhona Mitra, we're supposed to believe that she's kind of this hick who's kind of has this kind of background and stuff like that, and bit out of
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, no, it's totally unconvincing. And she can't do a southern accent either. It's one of the few times I can just sort of criticize the English actor for doing such a terrible job with it.
Right.
I thought she had an English accent and she was just like misspelling. She was slurring of trying to be drunk or something.
Well, she's
It
a
doesn't
British
sound
actress,
like to
so
me.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was. Yeah, I thought she was just doing a really bad drunk, basically. So, and I mean, God, they had also stuff like her talking about we're going to go and see the Demon King, and they tried to redo all of that dialogue, but
Right.
Outside of what shows you how good, I can't remember her name now, but the actress that played Geraldine in the original, she seemed so sort of out of her head that she could convincingly portray weird
Right.
kind of psychedelic dialogue or completely kind of like disconnected dialogue and make it really convincing. Rhona Mitra just seems like and then they go and see Alan Cumming, who's like the epitome of not the demon, like the angel king.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah. Oh man, there was just some other just dialogue. I wrote it down because it was just so bad that I had to write it down. But there was this one bit where when he first meets Doreen and she says, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" Blah blah blah. And he says, "Did you ever want to take every mirror in the world and break it because you don't like what was looking back at you?" And then she says, "Yeah." Like if someone said that to me, I'd just like
What?
Nutcase. But she's like, yeah, I do just want to go and smash every mirror around the world, and because I'm so unhappy. I mean, it's
man,
terrible. The weird inclusion here is Miranda Richardson putting on her best American accent as the estranged sort of wife of his brother. An odd choice. I mean, I really like Miranda Richardson as an actor, but yeah, not that she gets to do much in this, really. Yeah,
she's one of those actresses that like I don't know, like I feel like she kind of never really kind of got kind of put into a role that really takes advantage of kind of her talents and stuff like that, it seems, and stuff.
but she's I mean, if you've watched enough English TV, then if you've seen her in Blackadder and things like this, you'll know she's just phenomenal.
But it's like on screen, like, it doesn't seem like any role was kind of took advantage of that and stuff.
Yeah.
Weird.
Maybe she probably not conventionally kind of Hollywood looking enough, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, I think from what I gathered of why they made this was that they just recently, I think the studio had just got hold of a whole bunch of the rights to a whole bunch of old MGM catalog movies, and just thought, yeah, what the hell, let's ruin an old movie. And they didn't even release this in England because they knew it would just get completely trashed by the critics. Yeah, it only got a US release. So.
I didn't know that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I guess let's move on to Alfie, I guess, and stuff.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll like kind of and I guess you know better. For me, it'll also be a first time watch, so I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised, but I'm not really hopeful.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad as this, the Alfie.
Okay.
And it does at least have an English actor as Alfie. So
right.
It's not too bad.
That's a good start.
Yeah. But the original will be more eye-opening, probably because it's just so non-PC now in today's climate. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but yeah.
And like at some point in the future, I still feel like we got to do She's All That as an unofficial remake of My Fair Lady and stuff. I know your thing with musicals and stuff, but I feel like it's still like kind of due.
It's not that I don't like musicals. We've just done a lot of musicals. Actually, what I will say this is that if anyone wants the spiritual successor to Get Carter, I would say that is also really gritty and actually an amazing movie that goes under the radar is Dead Man's Shoes, which is a very similar plot in that it's basically but this time it's a military guy going back to find out why his brother got killed, and that is an amazing movie. It didn't get great reviews, but it's one of those ones that I think they just kind of got it wrong. And it's actually a really, really good movie that just gets passed up. It's an insanely good movie.
Cool. Alrighty. Look forward to kind of chatting about another Michael Caine remake, and I'm once again John Chang with Dan Edmonds, and we'll see you at the movies.